So what kind of concerns should we have about this type of question? Well, in reality, it's a little on the bias side, and mainly because it doesn't give any other options. It's sort of a yes or no question. It doesn't really give much of a why. Back in Unit 1 of this course, we looked at types of fallacies, and this would be what's called a limited choice fallacy. I'm simply going to ask you, do you favor a tax cut? Well, who would say no to that? Would you like to pay less money to the government? And the answer being yes, of course I would like to pay less money. But no one bothered to give it sort of a or statement. If you say yes, the consequence is this. If you say no, the consequence is this. So without consequences, we don't really have a better picture as to what the intent behind the question is. And historically, this question was actually asked at a national committee, and they conducted several polls. And in a similar poll, they actually found a large majority expressed great concern about federal deficits. So not only did people want a tax cut, but they also wanted to make sure that we weren't making more debt along the way. So if we're taking in less money as the government, we're creating more debt, which is better. Okay, and so when people had a chance to compare which one they wanted to do, either or, they found that they actually would prefer to have more taxes if that lowered the federal deficit. In other words, it contradicted what this question said simply because they didn't have too many choices. Okay, guideline number 7. We want to check the results are presented fairly. So we jump through all these hoops and we get good data, but the statistician still gets to present the data and still gets to tell us how to read it. So one of our concerns or one of our guidelines is to check in how the data is actually represented to us. How do they communicate all this? An example of this, a school board in Boulder, Colorado created a hubbub when it announced that 28% of the Boulder school children are reading below grade level and hence concluded the methods of teaching reading need to be changed. The announcement was based on reading test results in which 28% of Boulder school children scored below the national average for their grade. Based on that brief scenario, does the data support the board's conclusion? Well, okay, so you think about the 28%, it's below the national average. If you were told that from your kid, would you be upset about this? Okay, so the fact that 28% of the Boulder children scored below the national average for their grade implies that 72% scored at or above the national average. Therefore, the school's board's statement about students reading below grade level makes sense only if grade level means the national average for a particular grade. This interpretation of grade level is curious because it means that half the students in the nation are always below grade level, no matter how high the scores are. The conclusion that teaching method needs to be changed is not justified necessarily by this data. So, in other words, when we say below grade level, there's always going to be somebody below grade level. So the question you really needs to address is that 28% a representation of where we expect the students to be? Since there's always going to be someone below that bottom line. All right, guideline number 8, sort of a big picture, sort of a stand back statement. It's stand back and consider the conclusions. Take it all in, absorb all the details. And what is it they want us to do as a result of this data? Okay, so a couple of questions, a couple of things to consider along the way when we consider the conclusions. Did the study itself actually meet the goals? Earlier we talked about what are the goals of the study. When we're looking at the overall conclusion, did the study actually successfully meet its own goals? And therefore, it has some merit to what it is they want us to do. Does the conclusion even make sense? Or what they asking us to do, is that even a reasonable thing to do? There's a lot of things that we know are going on out in the real world. Doesn't mean we can do anything about them. Are there any other alternative explanations? That might also explain the conclusion, or explain what else might have happened. And is there any sort of practical significance? Just because we know that there's a problem and we know how to fix it, does that mean that we can necessarily fix it? Just because we want to go to Mars doesn't mean that's going to solve a lot of problems. And that's actually not true, because technically the space program has given us lots of technological advances. So here's a scenario of this. An experiment is conducted in which weight losses of people who try a new fast diet supplement are compared to the weight losses of a control group of people who try to lose weight in other ways. After 8 weeks, the results showed the treatment group lost an average of 1/2 pound more than the control. Assuming that there are no dangerous side effects, does this study suggest the fast diet supplement is a good treatment for people wanting to lose weight? Okay, so let's take a step back here. Let's just think about this. We're going to assume that they followed all the proper procedures. They tested randomly. They sorted people. They identified any confounding variables. Let's look at the conclusion. At the end of the day, what made the new drug so impressive? They found out that one group lost on average of 1/2 pound more than the other. Let's take that word average for a second. Well, average can mean lots of things. We could have one guy that lost a lot of weight and a couple of people that didn't lose any weight, in which case that would drag the average down. That could be a concern. Maybe everyone really did lose 1/2 pound. Is that going to be enough that people are going to switch to a new weight loss plan? Is that going to be enough that people are going to fork out money? When you watch the TV commercials, they don't usually tout 1/2 pound. They're touting anywhere from 40, 50 to 100 pounds different, just by trying some new program or some new drug. So 1/2 pound doesn't really have any practical significance. As far as an alternative explanation goes, could just be that. It could be one guy lost a lot of weight and was very successful for the one person. Could be the rest of them in that particular group gained weight. So there's just a lot of other questions that need to be addressed before we stop what we're doing and adjust to this new program.